think before I start, I think Magda and Chris can do a quick introduction, and I'll just get set off with the presentation if that suits you guys.
Hi everyone, my name is Magdalena Roche. I'm a police constable and work alongside with Fahad in our department. Most of our work involves community engagement, partnership and interventions work. So delivering information about hate crime is one of the few strands of our work. And as you've been told, hopefully at the end of the presentation, if you have any questions, we'll be trying to answer them as much as we can. If there are any questions you would want follow up, you can leave us your details and we'll just contact you. If there's anything you don't want to raise on the forum, we can follow that as well.
Yeah, there's quite a few on.
How are we doing, folks? My name's Chris Bell. I've been doing the school for in excess of 5 years. I'm a campus cop. In terms of policing, that's a long time. I know in terms of education, it's not, but it just gives you an insight into both the, I suppose, differences and the things that are very, very similar in terms of Police Scotland and Education Scotland. Thanks.
Ideal. So what I'm going to do, folks, if you can just bear with me, is I'll stop sharing my video just so the bandwidth's okay. I'm going to share my screen now, hopefully with you guys. And Magda, if you can let me know if that's come up. Ideal. So good evening, guys, and thank you very much for having Police Scotland here today at the Hate Crime webinar. It is an absolute pleasure to be here. My name's Fahad Bashir. I'm one of the police officers working in the Preventions, Interventions and Partnerships Department in Police Scotland. In my department, we monitor hate crimes on a daily basis, and we also deliver hate crime inputs to external organisations, the Glasgow City Parents Group being one of them. For Police Scotland, I'm also a tactical hate crime advisor, and further to that, in the Greater Glasgow Division, I head the portfolio for the third-party reporting centres within Glasgow. So today I will be talking about hate crimes and the role of Police Scotland when investigating these particular types of crimes. As you know, PC Chris Bell is a campus officer for Hindland and Hillhead. He's with us, and he'll talk a little bit later on about the impact of these types of crimes, particularly on the behaviours of that kind of hate crimes might have on children, and the behaviours children might show when being bullied or the victims of hate crime. At the end of the presentation, as Leanne has said, there will be a Q&A session, which will be opened up to everyone at the event to ask any questions. What I would just remind everyone is that just please ensure that the questions that are asked during the webinar are appropriate and respectful. What we do encourage kind of open discussion, but at the same time, we hope that is respectful and within the ethos of the environment that we're delivering this presentation in. I do hope that you do find the information provided in the presentation useful and relevant, and hopefully gives you a bit of insight into Police Scotland and how we deal with hate crime. Just before I start, a wee bit of a disclaimer that talking about hate crimes or incidents can be quite emotive. It's quite an emotive topic, which does evoke vastly different attitudes. I am going to be discussing potentially sensitive issues, potentially in the kind of Q&A session as well, which people may find upsetting. And again, if you can note that potentially if there's any language used in the presentation, it might be explicit, but it's not intended to offend anyone. However, what we want to do is we just want to be honest and realistic about what victims of hate crimes go through. So as long as everyone is okay with that and no objections, then I think we can get right into the presentation. So as long as you can see the next slide now, I'll just get onto the learning objectives. So the learning objective today for this hate crime webinar is for attendees to be able to define what a hate crime is, for you to be able to name the protected characteristics covered under Scottish legislation, and for you to be able to identify the different types of crime that can be motivated by prejudice. I'll be going through the Police Scotland's website and kind of showing you where you can locate and complete the online hate crime form. That might be useful for a lot of folk that are in attendance today. And again, the last learning objective, what Chris will go over later on, is about awareness of behaviours children might be displaying when being bullied or the victims of hate crime. So before I go on, talking about hate crime, I'm going to load a video up, a YouTube video up that I think might be kind of beneficial for attendees here today. It's essentially about members of the public thinking about what hate crime is. So what I'll do is I'll just stop sharing this and hopefully bring the link up. Can you see the screen right there? Ideal. So it's a quick 2-minute clip, and then I'll get back to talking after that.
Maybe it has something to do with that the motive of the crime is like on a personal level.
I think it's a kind of behavior that attacks the person that's kind of different from what the person's beliefs is. So, for example, when somebody hears me speaking in my accent, he might attack me because he knows that I'm Eastern European, and I'd consider it as a hate crime because he hates my nationality.
I think it's the mental or physical abuse of a person based simply on what their race or belief might be.
Well, I believe hate crime is crimes from prejudiced people happening and inflicted on people that have different beliefs and different race, ethnicity, and even religious beliefs.
Hate crime is related to racism, prejudice towards other people, other like race or religion, or even if they dress differently.
I think a hate crime is a crime committed against a person or a group of people due to their race or beliefs.
I think it's something malicious towards someone's race or gender.
I think hate crime is anything involved with like hate, discrimination.
Okay, folks, so I thought I'd just do a wee introduction with a video just in terms of what members of the public thought what hate crime is. So I'll go back to my presentation. Hopefully you'll be able to see it now. Yep, ideal. So I think it's important to realise that there's no single, apologies guys, there's something that's just playing in the background. Sorry about that, guys. I think YouTube was running in the background there again. So yeah, there's no accepted definition of the term hate crime. So different organisations may use, or the definition might be slightly varied. However, Police Scotland's definition is any crime which is perceived by the victim or any other person as being motivated by malice or ill will towards a social group. Now, I think the first time someone reads the definition of a hate crime, it can be quite kind of crowded. So I'll kind of break that down for you folk. So any crime can be a hate crime. So any crime reported to Police Scotland can have a hate crime aggravation attached to it. And again, I'll discuss that a little bit later on in depth, but I think it's important to realise that it can be any crime. It can be a minor crime or a major crime, but it can kind of fit in the category of a hate crime depending on what the kind of prejudice is there. If you look at the next word, perceived. Now, perceived is quite important in the definition of a hate crime. So if you see on the next slide, it talks about perception. So perception is the way in which something is regarded, understood, or interpreted by any person. Now, I think it's important to realise that you don't need to be disabled. You don't need to be a specific race, a religion, or even come from the LGBT community or identify yourself as a transgender person to be the victim of a hate crime. What matters is the perceived motivation of the perpetrator. Okay, so going back to the definition again, a victim or any other person can be, for example, a bystander, a witness, for example. It can be, housing officers, it can be family members. Someone can report it being a third-party reporting centre, a carer, or even a police officer, for example, overhears something being said or done. They can perceive that to be a hate crime as well. So in the definition, you also see the bit where it talks about motivated by malice or ill will. That refers to people acting on prejudice, acting on hatred, hostility, generally just being nasty or acting in cruelty. Social groups is quite important because that covers all the kind of protected characteristics. So that covers, and we'll go on to it, covers race, religion, sexual orientation, transgender identity, and kind of disability. So the hate crime does cover any situation of malice or ill will against a social group without there to be a need for a victim or an individual victim. So, for example, the best example I can give is if there's a vandalism on a pub or a bar that is used or frequented quite often by, the LGBT community. Now, that would be classified as a hate crime, even though no individual person has been directly attacked. So when an incident is identified as a hate crime, the law does treat it as an aggravated offence. This means that a judge will take the motivation behind the crime into consideration when deciding on the type of sentence given. So, for example, longer sentences, higher fines, community service, etc. It's important to realise that being the victim of a hate crime can be quite a frightening experience because the person has been targeted because of who they are or who their attacker thinks they are. So unlike non-hate crime related offences, the attack is quite personal and quite targeted, which means it's less likely to be a random attack. I think we'll cover hate incident as well. So the definition of a hate incident is any incident. It's quite similar to a hate crime, but it's essentially not a crime. It's a non-crime incident. So it's any incident which is perceived by the victim or any other person to be motivated by malice and ill will towards a social group, but which does not constitute a criminal offence. So in terms of non-crime incidents, while it is accepted that not every hate report will amount to criminality, officers are required to take preventative and protective measures even when a non-criminal offence is apparent. The next slide that we're going to go on to talks about protected characteristics. Now, these are the 5 protected characteristics that are currently under legislation that kind of fit into the hate crime. So the first protected characteristic, which we'll talk about them in depth just over the next couple of slides, but the first one is race. The second one being religion. Third one being sexual orientation, transgender identity, and disability. So when we're talking about race, I know a lot of you might already know this, but I'll cover it anyway. So race can be based on skin colour, nationality, your ethnic or your national origins, or it can be a combination of these. A person can belong to lots of different racial groups. It's quite important to realise that race also includes asylum seekers, refugees, and the kind of travelling community or Gypsy Travellers. I mean, I've talked about ethnicity, but ethnicity is essentially the word that's used to describe the cultural identity of a person. Now, the members of a particular ethnicity are perceived to share, for example, cultural traits such as language, even religion, nationality, ancestry, dress and customs. So ethnicity is different to race, which is quite important to realise because it is also to do with the cultural identity and not the physical characteristics of a person. So, for example, something close to home, for example, Scotland and England, so Scottish and English people, both can be considered different ethnicities, even if they are, categorised under the same race. Okay, so racism essentially is a form of discrimination based on race, especially the belief that one race is superior to another. Going on to religion now, religion or even belief. Religion is any religious or belief group, including those of no religion or those who don't identify themselves with a religion. People often use the word religion to mean the worship of a god or gods, but some religions do not have gods. So it's important to understand that people can also experience religious prejudice even if they don't follow a religion. Now, your Abrahamic religions include religions such as Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, and you've got Judaism as well, and other non-Abrahamic religions including Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, and atheism, which folk will realise is basically no belief or no belief in a god. So different religions do have different beliefs, practices, and leadership structure. In many regions of the world, religion is the defining characteristic of people. So some people may evaluate their religion as the one and only true belief system or faith. The absolute conviction of superiority over all other religions can be dangerous, and that's where you kind of get religious prejudice. So religious prejudice is the kind of negative attitudes or behaviours between people of different religious groups because of their differing religious beliefs. Okay, so talking about sexual orientation. Sexual orientation is based on emotional or physical attraction to individuals of a different gender, the same gender, or more than one gender. Sexual orientation can be seen as a complex mix of individuals' identities, attraction, and behaviour. However, identity is the most important aspect, as sexual orientation can only be determined by the individual. Attraction and or behaviour alone do not determine someone's sexual orientation. So examples of sexual orientation can include, for example, lesbian, gay, bisexual, heterosexual, asexual, pansexual, and queer. Homophobia and biphobia in relation to sexual orientation is the fear, hatred, discomfort, mistrust of people who are lesbian, gay, or bisexual. Biphobia is the fear, hatred, or discomfort or mistrust, specifically of people who are identify themselves as bisexual. Going on to transgender identity. Now, transgender identity is an umbrella term for those whose gender identity or expression differs from their gender at birth and conflicts with the norms of society. Included in the overall transgender umbrella are also kind of transsexual people, non-binary gender identities, and also cross-dressing people. And simply, transphobia describes the fear, dislike, or hatred of transgender or transsexual people. Going on to disability. Now, disability is any disability, including physical disability, learning disabilities, or even mental impairment. Now, the definition of disability under the Equality Act is if you have a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial and long-term negative effect on your ability to do normal daily activities. Now, substantial is more kind of minor or trivial. For example, it takes much longer than it usually would to complete a daily task, like getting dressed, for example. Long-term kind of refers to 12 months or more. So, for example, if you've got a breathing condition that develops as a result of a lung infection, that can be kind of defined as long-term under the disability definition. I think with the disability kind of community or the population, the disabled population is actually the world's largest minority, which quite surprisingly, I had never thought about this before, but it's a minority in which anyone can become a part of at any time. It's important to understand disabilities are not just visible, but they're also non-visible as well. So this can vary from people being visually impaired, blind, deaf, hard of hearing, physical disabilities, learning disabilities, and also mental health conditions. So that's quite an important kind of fact to realise that, you know, disabilities aren't always visible. So it's just to be mindful of that. Statistics around the disability protected characteristic are quite important here, where you know, research indicates that 97% of disability hate crime is unreported or underreported. In Scotland alone, there are around 1 million disabled people in Scotland. I think that equates to about 1 in 5 of the population. So about 17% of disabled people were actually born with their disabilities. The majority of disabled people acquire their disability later on in life, so it's not something that you are necessarily born with or have from birth. And also 1 in 4 people will be affected by mental health or mental ill health in the course of their life as well. Now, these are all open source statistics that I think you can kind of widely research online if required. Now, going on to the types of crime that can be covered under hate crime, there is currently hate crime legislation in Scotland that relates or that's in relation to crimes carried out which have been aggravated by prejudice. This means there is a legal responsibility for Police Scotland to investigate, and the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service to prosecute persons for committing hate crimes. So this ensures that protected characteristics such as race, religion, sexual orientation, transgender identity, and disability are protected under legislation due to the statutory aggravations in law protecting victims of hate crime. Now, if you look on the screen, I've included a few possible hate crimes, and it kind of goes in order from kind of, I wouldn't say less serious, but kind of what can be perceived as minor crimes to kind of more major crimes. So hate crime, again, the use of social media, for example, is now prevalent. Majority of the households have tablets, have phones, for example, and access to social media is very, very easy now. So hate crimes can include, online abuse on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, even, for example. It's difficult to keep up with all the social media platforms. It can increase to, for example, vandalism, graffiti, or damage to someone's property. It can go from threatening to intimidating behaviour, verbal abuse, insults, name calling, for example, to more serious offences, much more serious offences such as harassment, assaults, serious assaults, robbery, and unfortunately, there have been hate crimes in the past in relation to murder as well. So on the scale of it, you can see it can go from something that people might perceive as very trivial to something very, very serious that covers the most amount of punishment in the eyes of the law. So the next slide is a hate crime example. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to put anyone on the spot. It's just kind of to make you realise how we categorise it, or how we break down a hate crime example. So on the screen, you'll see the example. So Police Scotland receive a report. And before I start, these have been examples that, we have come across, in our department that have happened across Scotland. So quite kind of important to realise that these kind of crimes happen. So this example is that Police Scotland receive a report by a member of the public that a swastika symbol has been spray painted on the wall of a synagogue. Now, for anyone, for most of you in attendance, you'll probably realise that the swastika symbol with the Jewish community doesn't resonate well. It's got kind of very negative connotations because of what happened previously to the Jewish community as they were subjected to kind of genocide and hate crime. So a swastika symbol spray painted has been kind of put onto the wall of a synagogue. So the crime for this hate crime example would simply be a vandalism. But because there's a perceived kind of hate element to this, the aggravator for this vandalism would be religion. Again, it could be kind of defined as anti-Semitic. So the crime, again, would be vandalism with an aggravator for religion. And just one more example, and hopefully this is kind of making sense to you now. A group of youths get onto the bus when they see two males sitting on the bus holding hands. When two of the males have kind of tried to get off the bus, get up and get off the bus, one of the youths in the group has punched and kicked the couple, shouting, "Gays are not welcome here." Now, in terms of the hate crime example, so very simply, what is the crime? And the crime would be assault. And the aggravation here would be sexual orientation. So that's how we would categorise it. We'd categorise it as an assault. And the aggravator in this situation would be sexual orientation. With these two examples, I'm hoping this kind of clarified matters, but if you've got any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box or chat, and then we'll pick up on it after we're done with this session. So talking about impact, previous research in relation to hate crime indicates that impact on victims ranges from family relations between couples or spouses being affected, health and well-being of victims being compromised, and also there's been kind of research around a sense of isolation or social isolation because friends and relatives were less likely to visit. Children were not allowed to play outside from certain families, and in some cases, other children had problems at school. So, and again, that's not going away from people having issues at work as well. It is clear that with hate crimes, not only does the victim and their family suffer, but others in the same minority category do as well. So certain kind of hate crimes are known to be kind of message crimes. because what they essentially do is they send out a message out that anybody with the victim's characteristics are not welcome in the community. So hate crime and kind of even hate speech can divide and create more hatred. So as a society, we need to be very, very mindful of that. What I will do is I will bring Chris in at this point now just to talk about behaviours. Again, given Chris's kind of significant background as being a campus officer and kind of dealing with pupils and children, I think he's kind of best placed to talk about this. So Chris, just over to you if you want to unmute your mic and talk about kind of behaviours that parents might kind of come across with the children.
How are we doing, folks? This is by no means an exhaustive list, and you can see it in front of you.
Oh, Chris, sorry, we've lost your sound for a wee second there.
Leanne, I might just give Chris maybe a minute or so. Maybe it's just a kind of poor connection.
That's me back.
I do.
I don't know why I
got you.
I just lost connection there. Apologies. Just very poor Wi-Fi, I'd guess. I'm a dad of two. I've got one going into fourth year. She is 15 in December. I've got another going into first year. So essentially, it's about you've lived with a young person in your house for X amount of years and you know them, and it's a change in their behaviour. Whether it's a change in their demeanour, their behaviour, that it becomes a problem, them going to school. If your young person is like my young people in my house, trying to remove them from their laptop, oblique phone is like trying to remove a limb. They're stuck to it 24/7. And if that becomes not the case, then I'd certainly be digging into why that is. Lost and damaged items. If my children are very, very much like me, that it's a good job that I'm chunky, because otherwise I'd be black and blue. So young people do damage things. Young people do lose things. However, on a repeated basis, again, it's just about sitting down and having those conversations. Sometimes hard conversations, and sometimes conversations that the young person will not want to be having. But believe it or not, well, what I say to mine is that at 15 you don't know everything, and years on this planet give you some experience and some thoughts on the things that happen. We've all been through it. We didn't appear at 40 odd years of age on the planet. We grew up as well in a very different time. I think young people nowadays are, I suppose, far more savvy, certainly far more tech savvy. I'm a technophobe, and a meeting like this to me just blows my mind. However, that's how young people communicate now. That's their world, and we need to be part of that world if we want to keep them safe. A sudden loss of friends. Young people will come in and out of friendships. Once they settle in a friendship group, then sometimes just them losing that group, it's maybe worth questioning. And really, as I said, it's not an exhaustive list. It's really just knowing the person that's in your house, knowing that they've changed, and then finding out why. And probably that's the toughest thing, because I'm not sitting here by any means any expert. I have the same conversations. How was school? Fine. That doesn't really tell you a lot, to be fair, does it? So it's about maybe digging a wee bit more and finding out. There will be times where these things happen without it being bullying or hate crime, and that's fine. But if you know your young person or your child, then you'll be able to wheedle out what's going on. And I think that's really what we want to know. We want to be as involved in their world as we can, and therefore we can protect them. Just like if you are sending your young person out to the park, you want to know where they're going, who they're going with, what time they'll be back, etc. what I'd be suggesting is that that's exactly the same on social media, that you want to know who they're talking to, how long they've been on, where these people are, how they know them, and just if they have a friendship group on social media, then we need to be looking into what that friendship group is and be aware of the passwords, etc., of our young people's phones, so that we're able to keep them safe. That for me, if and again I can only speak for myself, if my children both have phones and I have access to both phones, I pay for them, therefore technically they're mine, although I give them to my children. And to keep them safe, I have access to both phones. It sounds like an invasion of privacy for some, but they know. I'll say to them before I go in the phone, I'm going to be opening up your phone and looking at it tonight, so is there anything I need to know? So, very good. If you've got any questions, hit us up at the end and we'll see where we go from there. Thanks.
I'm just going to move on, guys, in terms of how to make a report. Now, I think it's quite important to realise that apart from the kind of non-emergency number of 101 and 999 being emergency, there is different reporting mechanisms in which you can contact Police Scotland. So on the slide, you'll just see in front on the screen, obviously you can call police on 101 non-emergency, 999 if it is an emergency. You can also attend in person at any police station. The next slide, I'll be talking about how you complete a hate crime form online, so you can do that on the website as well. There is third-party reporting centres throughout Greater Glasgow, and I can kind of show you once I share my screen on the Police Scotland website how you can kind of go into that. If you're deaf, hard of hearing or speech impaired, you can text 999 in an emergency. You can also contact Crime Stoppers anonymously by calling their number on 0800 555 111. And there's also a facility to make contact with the police through the Keep Safe Scotland app. Now you can fill a form online. That is the direct link to the Police Scotland website. But again, a lot of people might, forget that it's easily forgettable. What I'll do is I'll now share my screen to go online to show you how this can be done. I think that'll be probably a more beneficial way of showing you rather than kind of showing you screenshots. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for 2 seconds so I can kind of bring up the other screen. So if you can just stand by.
Fahad, while you're doing that, I'll just let everyone know that tonight's presentation that Fahad's shown you will also be connected to the recording of tonight's webinar. So don't worry too much about trying to remember everything that you've seen and heard tonight. That was a lot of information, particularly this part, because Fahad's going to share the presentation with me, and when we upload the recording to YouTube, then in the description of the YouTube video, we'll have that presentation there so that you can look back and go over like the recording process and things like that again if you need to. Thank you, Leanne. Leanne, just while you're on the microphone, I take it you can see what's in front of the screen just now, yeah? Yep, you're good to go. No problem at all. So again, I'll tell you what way you can fill a form online. So the easiest way is just to type in www.scotland.police.uk. If you fail to remember that, then it's quite easy on a Google search. You just type in Police Scotland, and the first link on the kind of Google website should direct you to the Police Scotland website. Now at the top, I'm not entirely sure if you can see my cursor, but you've got a couple of a few tabs at the top. Essentially what you want to be doing is you want to be going to the Contact Us section, and you can probably see there's so many different options, so many different facilities for you to contact Police Scotland for different reasons. But for today's kind of session, is more to do with reporting a hate crime. So on the left-hand side, just under Contact Us, is actually the first link, Report Hate Crime and Third-Party Reporting. So this gives you quite a bit of information about what hate crime is, and also what third-party reporting is. Third-party reporting is essentially organisations or third-party reporting centres within the communities that are there kind of to aid you into reporting a crime to Police Scotland if you're not comfortable enough doing that. One perfect example I can give is, for example, if someone's got a disability, they're hard of hearing, or they've got kind of limited eyesight, they can make contact whether the third-party reporting centre or get someone to fill this form online on their behalf. So there are so many different facilities and reporting mechanisms. It's just about making that easier for victims of hate crimes or witnesses to make contact with Police Scotland. So just on the screen, again, it's probably some of the information I showed you already. On the third bullet point, you can see hate crime reporting form. That's essentially what you want to be going on. So we'll click on that, and hopefully you can see on my screen now the online reporting form. I'll give you an example. If you're looking to report something that's an emergency, something that's ongoing, this is not the facility to be doing that. So if you type in yes, straight away this comes up saying, you know, if it's an emergency, if someone's in danger, if your life's in danger, if it's not safe to do so, if you're not in a safe position, you're phoning 999 and kind of requesting for the police as soon as possible. So this is, again, just to reiterate, for non-emergency incidents or something that's already happened. So when you select no, the next pop-up that comes up is asking you, what do you want to report? Now, on the drop-down menu, you can see other options: domestic abuse, stalking, harassment, for example, but that's not what we're looking at today. We're looking at the kind of 5 protected characteristics. So you can choose between religion, race, disability, sexual orientation, transgender identity. Just for the purpose of this example, we'll click on race. And the next box that comes up, and what I will reiterate is it's quite a simplified process. It's nothing too difficult. If there's information you don't know, it doesn't stop you from going on to the next bit, unless it's the first couple of drop-down sections or questions. This asks you if you're reporting the concern for someone else. If it's about you, you obviously select yes, this is about me. If it's for someone else, sorry, if it's for yourself, you just click no, this is about me. So for this instance, I'll just click it's about me. So again, this is not applicable, but you can choose to give information anonymously. And again, that's the benefit of this form. But what we do encourage is that you do provide as many details as possible for us to kind of progress our investigations or our inquiries. So for this instance, I'll say I don't wish to remain anonymous. And again, you're just typing in your details, and I'm not going to do for everything, but you can just see it here. So my name's Fahad. I'll be just self-explanatory. So you're just filling all this information out, for example. Okay. Obviously, the information that's asking you for is stuff like your address, your name, your postcode, phone number, email address, your date of birth, for example. Also, we do ask what the best way in which you can contact, in which we can kind of contact you back should we need to. So if you can leave a phone, an email address, a visit to your home address, for example, or if you don't wish to be contacted, that's where you can kind of determine all that. Again, availability when a time is more suitable for you. For example, if you're working or if evening times are better. And again, if you've got any special requirements, so you know, if you're hard of hearing, limited to kind of mobility, you know, anything like that, anything that might affect you being able to make a report to Police Scotland, please put that in there. And then obviously you've got the drop-down menu or section for that as well. So the next section here, if you can see, folks, we're essentially asking you what has happened. So if you've seen someone being racially abused, for example, or you've seen unknown males shouting racial abuse at someone down the street, you're basically just you know, typing that here. So observed male getting racial abuse on street, for example. This is asking you where did it happen, so leave as much information as you can. So if it's on London Road in Glasgow, I'm just writing that because that's where we were kind of working from. You'd be writing London Road, and also if there's a kind of cross-reference, so if it's near a petrol station, a fuel station, another building, because London Road is quite a big road. If you've got a number as well, you stick that there in junction with whatever street it is. So as much information we've got, the better, because it will aid us in our investigation inquiries. When did this happen? That, again, pretty self-explanatory. It's to do with kind of times and dates, essentially. This next section asks about if you can give a description of someone. Now, this is very, very important for us. If someone's got distinguishing features, for example, if they've got tattoos, if they've got a birthmark on their face, for example, piercings, you know, a description of them, height, skin color, what they're wearing, all that information really does kind of assist us and benefits us in our investigations. And again, the last section asks for any more information that might assist us to carry out our investigation. So that could be something to do with, you know, if the suspect's left a bottle there that might have DNA on it, for example, or if there's CCTV there, or if you've got the names or details of people that witnessed that and they've left their details for kind of corroboration of a crime, that's where you're going to be sticking that. Again, if you don't have all this information, it's not a problem at all. It's just more about filling out as much as you can, just so it can make our job easier in terms of investigating and progressing the inquiry. And quite simply, you just click the Submit to Police Scotland button, and what essentially happens is, and I'll talk you through the next stages, what happens when a hate crime is reported to us. If for whatever reason you're not comfortable being on that page, if someone's near you, my mouse is hovering over something, it's a link. So the minute you click on that link, it kind of goes to the BBC website. So that's maybe handy if you've got folk around you and you're not comfortable kind of making them aware that you're reporting something to Police Scotland. So hopefully that's useful. I know I've kind of gone through, I'm just conscious of time as well. I do have that on our presentation. So again, I will share our presentation, but I'll skip the rest of that because Leanne will be sharing that amongst all the kind of parents as well. So I'll just skip all this, but this is an example of a hate crime and what kind of information we're looking for. So you will get that in your presentation. So what happens next? So once you've submitted that form to Police Scotland, for example, what does happen next? We essentially record the incident on our systems, and what we do very simply is we investigate the circumstances, essentially to determine whether a crime has been committed or has occurred. And again, just kind of linking that back to a hate incident as well. If it's a crime or an incident, that's what we kind of determine. But the steps we take after that are very, very similar. Now, on the screen, you'll be able to see on the left-hand side, if you've reported anonymously and not left any details, we still carry out certain kind of police actions, preventative measures, or intelligence-led policing, if that makes sense. So, say, for example, you've reported this anonymously to Police Scotland, we utilise it for intelligence, because as you know, for Police Scotland, you know, intelligence-led policing is a must. The more we get fed in terms of information, the more we can make an impact to the communities that we serve. If we're aware of, you know, a certain area this has happened, you know, our officers in the local area can increase local patrols and kind of focus on them areas if we know there's a vulnerability there to certain groups or individuals. Again, if a third-party reporting centre has reported this to us, and the person doesn't wish for their details to be left, then we feed information back to the third-party reporting centres and make them aware of what kind of police actions have occurred. We sometimes liaise with partner agency, could include kind of health, the local authorities, for example, and ultimately we investigate as well. If you look on the other side of the chart, it talks about name given. So we do the exact same thing. The only difference is we also speak to the victim, provide the victim with kind of victim care advice. In our department, we also provide crime prevention advice and personal safety and security advice as well. And essentially that kind of feeds into the well-being and ensuring the kind of the victim is kind of made sure to be okay, because ultimately once you've been the victim of a hate crime, we want to ensure that they are safe and well. If we identify further information, get enough statements, and there is enough evidence, for example, whether it's been reported anonymously or by a designated name, we would look to arrest and charge the individual for the hate crime. And once we've arrested and charged the individual for that hate crime, that report is then submitted to the Procurator Fiscal. Now, the Procurator Fiscal works for the Crown Office and the Procurator Fiscal Service, often referred to as COPFS, COPS, which is also the body responsible for prosecuting crime in Scotland. So once that's reported to the Procurator Fiscal, the PF considers the police report. And ultimately what they do is they decide if there is sufficient evidence to proceed. If there is enough evidence and sufficient evidence, the Procurator Fiscal will then decide what or if any action is appropriate to take. Now, actions do range from, for example, prosecutions in court, direct measures such as warnings. You also get fiscal fines, community payback orders, and also social work diversion. The PF can also decide to take no action. However, when this does happen, the victim can ask for an explanation of this decision. Now, that often happens when there's kind of limited evidence, or the evidence is quite poor, and the PF can't then further that case to court due to the lack of evidence, for example. If court proceedings are considered to be appropriate, the Procurator Fiscal will decide which court these should be taken in or kind of held in. The decision will depend on the nature of the offence, the sentencing powers of the respective courts, and whether the accused has a criminal record. If the crime has been committed by a child but was still reported to the Fiscal, the case can be referred to the SCRA, which is the Scottish Children's Reporter. That is the end of the presentation or the information that we've provided. Essentially, the aim of this webinar, the hate crime webinar, was to give you a better understanding of what a hate crime is, and also the different reporting mechanisms to report incidents to Police Scotland. The purpose of this was for you to be able to understand what a hate crime is, to understand what the protected characteristics are, identify the different ranging crime types that can be motivated by prejudice. I know it's quite a fast explanation of the hate crime form, but to give you an understanding of where you can access the hate crime form and what kind of information is required, and as what Chris really nicely put, the kind of awareness of behaviours children might display when being bullied or being the victims of hate crime. I think it's quite important to remember that, and as much as it sounds cheesy, that you are really important as individuals, because you're in a position to make a huge difference to victims of hate crimes. It doesn't take much to be that difference. I think it's quite important to realise that the consequences of committing a hate crime can have a very, very devastating impact on the victim, their family, and the communities that we serve or that we're in. If found guilty of a hate crime, a person can be looking at jail time, and if you're convicted with a criminal record, this could massively affect your future life choices as well. And that includes, future employment, learning opportunities, or even restrictions as to where you can travel overseas. So quite frankly, I'll just wrap this up now. Police Scotland's position on hate crime is very simply this. Hate crime in any form is never acceptable. No one should ever suffer or tolerate it. It is an abhorrent offence which can have a lasting impact on a victim, leaving them feeling very isolated and scared. We know hate crimes can be underreported, so please, if you or someone that you know has been a victim to hate crime, I do urge you to report it. We will take the matters very, very seriously. That is the end of the presentation. I do thank you very much for your patience. Again, like Leanne said, she'll be sending this presentation through to yourself, so there's quite a few links there that will maybe talk in depth about what hate crimes are or give you more information about hate crimes and statistics. And also the first link on that page is the link straight to the reporting form. I think that now takes us on to the questions. So I do believe Magda's probably been going through them. So if Magda, you want to read out some, there has been, or we can just kind of answer them as we go along.
Yeah, I was going to take advantage of hosting tonight.
Of course you can.
Because I just wanted to bring it back to, obviously our group, the main aim of our group is to support parents and carers.
Yep.
To support their children and young people's learning. So whilst, yes, all that information is all correct, I just want to bring it back for those attending that this group ultimately supports young people through their education journey, and that is the whole point of hosting tonight's event. So my questions are kind of pulling us back that way. So maybe it's a couple of questions for Chris. When you're talking about reporting a crime or an incident, now I'm imagining maybe my young person, my teenager, if she witnesses maybe something in school that she's concerned about, can she go to her campus officer and report that, or kind of inform you about it, but know that her name would maybe not be included in any kind of investigations going forward? Because I can imagine that's what really would put young people off maybe kind of approaching their campus officer.
Absolutely. I'm into two schools at the moment, but I used to be in a third school that I did for a long time, and the kind of theory there was if you're a grass, you get done in type thing. So the schools, pastoral care, campus cops work on the information they get, and they hear it from usually teachers or through the rumour mill, believe it or not. And these rumours just so happen to be very accurate a lot of the time. Young people can rest assured if they are to come and report something to their campus cop or to their pastoral care or to a deputy head, that there are wise heads in those positions that will be able to deal with incidents without bringing them into it at all.
Okay, that's good to know, because I'm guessing that would probably be like the number one thing that would have young people shy away. Even if they saw something, they just probably wouldn't report it. So one more question, and then I promise everyone I'll kind of let you guys jump in. So just, it was interesting. I wanted to ask you, as your experience as a campus officer, do you think that young people are more aware of these kind of incidents now and more open to reporting them?
I think that young people, I think young people are far more aware of a huge range of different issues that when I was probably first, second, even third year in school, I had no idea about it. It's as if as time moved on, maybe not maturity levels have moved on, but just access to information has moved on, and therefore the ability to know about the protected characteristics, etc., that and live with these around them in the school is something that every young person probably does on a daily basis. Probably my biggest concern with regard to that is that once young people get into their friendship groups, I think some conversations that they have can include such comments with regard to these protected characteristics that might be negative. And I think it's just knowing that it's not just it's knowing your audience. When you're speaking to your pals, that might be appropriate there, but if someone else hears it, it then becomes an issue. And I think for me, it's just about educating young people in terms of what they would class sometimes as banter is actually a form of, it could be classed as a form of criminality that action could be taken upon.
Yeah. I think we're in a fortunate position in Glasgow that obviously we have campus officers like yourself. I grew up Mairdrie, we didn't have that. So I think that's where you guys, we have the benefit of having the campus officers in the schools, and like you've just said, young people are kind of more knowledgeable now, hopefully, because they have all this information coming at them. Right, okay, I'll shut up now, Magda, and I'll let you kind of take over any questions that have come in from anybody watching.
Hi there. Yeah, well, we'll just, there were a few questions in similar tone. So few people asked about is sex protected under the characteristics listed? And a lot of people mentioned that there might be issues of like girls basically experiencing some behavior or bullying. So at the moment, as Fahad was saying, gender is not listed under the protected characteristics. We've got 5. There was a new hate crime act now, which was passed by the parliament. We don't have the date when it will start operating and start being active. However, that act does not also explicitly cover the sex. It adds age and variations in sex characteristics, but that's a really fair point, and I can imagine why you, as parents of school kids, see this as such a big issue where girls are experiencing sexual abuse and harassment. There are other crimes under the Sexual Crimes Act that a lot of different crimes are covered under that act, and we can add aggravator as gender. So if it's something which is clearly against female or a young girl, that can be added to the case. But at the moment, gender is not covered by one of the hate crimes. So you couldn't commit a hate crime because of discriminating someone because of their gender. So I think that will answer quite a few questions asked here. Another question asked by Tam, if someone wishes to report an incident but have lots of details and supporting screenshots, does this need to be included at the time of completing the form? And again, Fahad mentioned one of the forms of crimes we are dealing with, especially involving young people, will be online crimes. So I would imagine there'll be a lot of similar, supportive evidence. So no, at the moment of completing the form, if there was anything which we would want to capture as soon as possible, for example, CCTV, we would ask for this information to be added. But after reporting online, there will be always a follow-up contact by the officers, and no doubt there will be like a follow-up visit or a phone call or exchanging of emails. So there will be a time to add the extra evidence or the materials. Then can only be mentioned. But the form is there to capture the most important information at the time of the crime being reported, to give us the essence of what happened. That form then is passed on to local officers that cover local division, and then they make a direct contact with a reporter, and basically just depending on the nature of the crime and the report, further actions will be taken. So as I say, there can be a follow-up visit or arranging a suitable time at the police office, or just speaking over the phone and basically resolving it that way. So again, at the beginning, it's just the initial form. Another question, SAB or SAB is just in capitals. How do you deal with a hate crime if the crime was established and there will be special grounds of a person's mental health difficulty of the perpetrator and the members of the public having faith that this will be dealt with the most appropriate manner, and how we are informed, or we like members of the public informed of the outcome other than just reporting. So again, this is a very difficult one, because of course the police will be taking all the information into consideration. So we'll be taking statements, we'll be taking additional evidence that is available at the time, and we'll be also of course questioning the suspect perpetrator, and then the report will be sent further to the Procurator Fiscal with all that information taken into consideration, or there'll be alternative method of disposing. So it's difficult to answer just basing on that information, but I think Fahad.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit in there. Obviously, mental health is a lot of work that's been kind of done by the Scottish Government, along with kind of third sector organisations as well. We would be looking, depending on the type of crime, the type of person, and the type of kind of mental health that they have, is to kind of link in with health, get advice from consultants, establish whether the person with the mental health issues is compos mentis, aware of their actions in terms of if they're able to determine what's right and what's wrong. So ultimately, we do have these processes in place, especially for example, folk that are detained under the Mental Health Act. For example, up in Stobble Hospital, had previous dealings there where we get the kind of advice of the consultant and get a statement to that effect. Ultimately, we would include that in the report if that case was to be submitted to the Procurator Fiscal, and ultimately that is for the Procurator Fiscal to make a decision on what to do with that case, on the grounds that someone's got mental health related issues. Just one kind of question I've seen further up, Magda, if you don't mind if I can answer that one. One of the questions that have come up is, what discretion do officers have if a complaint is clearly false, or I'm not even going to bother pronouncing that, but basically it's vexatious. Is that right, Leanne? You probably know better than me. Essentially what happens is, we as an organisation, or Police Scotland or officers, are there to be impartial. So when something's reported into us, we look at all circumstances, we look at all the facts that are kind of provided to ourselves. If there is overwhelming evidence that the report that someone's made is false and vexatious, then obviously we address that, and then a report isn't submitted to the Procurator Fiscal, for example. if for example, there's kind of conflicting information that comes out to us, we then submit the report to Procurator Fiscal, and we clearly highlight that there is kind of conflicting information or evidence. So again, it's for us to be transparent, it's for us to be impartial and report circumstances when they are merited, essentially. So hopefully that's answered that. The next question, as a parent and educator, the attendee is concerned that sex has been excluded from the legislation as it is not a protected characteristic. I am wondering, given the high prevalence of girls being subjected to slut shaming or abuse, what options they have when threatened. As for the legislation, that's obviously out with our control in terms of Police Scotland. That's obviously a decision that the Scottish Parliament would make. But you know, if you're having instances where, you know, individuals are being slut shamed or being threatened, like I've said, there's legislation already and currently in place for that. And just on top of that, what Chris was saying, it's about educating children at that stage where they might not know if their behaviour is acceptable or not, and kind of I'm not saying it is acceptable in terms of playground banter. So our preventative measures better in place in terms of educating and informing young folk about what is acceptable and what is not socially acceptable. So hopefully that answers your question there.